also live well so we can be strong, sharp, and be energized as the year goes by. So you don't want to just add years to your life. You want to add life to your years. This is very true for the seniors, right? So today, we're going to learn how to take full control and charge of our health by biohacking the 4 optimal health, which is your digestion, and which is your immunity, mobility, and energy. So before we do anything to unlock our potential to live longer, live better, we want to first address the main antithesis of longevity, the main nemesis. The nemesis of longevity is resistance. There you go. Okay, this is actually the hidden pandemic for a long time. Around 50 years, it's been claiming so many lives. And not only now affecting the older people, but also the younger people in this generation. And that's because, yeah, I'm not doing really well clicking, right? Okay. That's because the food industries keep poisoning our diet with high fructose, high sugar, refined carbohydrates, preservatives and toxins, you name it. It creates a very addictive, unhealthy eating behavior for everyone, very hard to get out of. And to make the situation even worse, the seed oils add gasoline to the fire, creating a multifaceted attack on our biochemistry. So let's look at the next slide, which is the major chronic diseases out there that affects the digestion, immunity, mobility, and energy. You see they're all directly and indirectly linked to one thing, insulin resistance. So about 100 years ago, these kind of diseases barely existed, and that's because our diet were very simple. Very whole foods with 0 to less sugar, preservatives, and all poisons they put in there. Now everything is pretty much poisoned. So what exactly is insulin? Insulin is this storing hormone produced by your pancreas through the beta cells, and its main job is to clear the sugar out of your blood and bring it to every cell for energy. That's how we live. And over consumption of sugar and refined carbohydrates overstimulates the production of your insulin, straining your organ pancreas. So this is like asking someone to do 100 push-ups when they can only do 30. That's pretty much it. So to make you further understand, let me illustrate it to you this way. Next slide. Okay, so when food comes in, it gets broken down into dietary sugar and then goes into the bloodstream. And in return, the beta cells have to deploy insulin to clear the sugar and deliver it to the cells. But when there's already insulin resistance, the cell will not accept the sugar and demands for more insulin to get the job done. So the beta cells have no choice but to comply. So they produce more, and that works for a while, but it becomes an unhealthy, vicious cycle. Over time, something breaks your beta cells of your pancreas because it can't produce enough, so it needs to get help from outside source, which is what you call type 2 diabetes. So the problem with the sugar in your blood and too much of it and too long in it, it can kill you literally. So the body is very smart. It has to find ways to survive. So the sugar has to be converted to fatty acids in form of triglycerides in the liver and in the blood system. And that becomes, later on, fatty liver and build up plaque in your arteries. Now you see the connection? And the worst part, the brain also takes the hit. Go back to the brain, please. The brain takes the hit because the brain cells are not getting enough nutrients, called brain insulin resistance, and that becomes Alzheimer's disease. That is why it's called type 3 diabetes. Yikes. So the problem, next slide, is not in the behavior of the person. It's really actually the biochemistry. So when the person begins to biohack their biochemistry towards health, the behavior naturally improves. And so now, we are going to learn how to take full control of our health through biohacking with biosoftwares. And we have to biohack the 4 pillars of your optimal health, which is the next slide. Digestion, immunity, mobility, and energy. I know the last time some of you heard the digestion pillar, so now I'm glad to get to introduce the rest. And moving on, let's go to digestion, which I think is the most important out of all the pillars. Let's look at the gut. Next slide. So the gut is actually considered as the second brain because it is connected through the brain via vagus nerves and communicates with the neurotransmitters. And it's called gut-brain axis. Next slide. And your dopamine, which is your reward system neurotransmitters, about 50% of that are in the gut. And 95% of your serotonin, the happy hormone, is also in the gut. And the good bacteria, which deals with stress and hormonal response, collaborates with your immune cells. And guess what? 70 to 80% of that are in your gut, particularly in the colon. So the point is, next slide, that everything revolves around the gut. Now let's look at these individuals on the next slide. They all have maladies. Well, I'm sorry, going back to that, even study shows that no matter how good you are with your diet and exercise, it's very difficult to lose weight and get fit because your gut is not in good shape. So the next slide, okay, there you go. Next one. So the next one would be looking at these different individuals with different maladies, but they all have one thing in common. And that is, next slide, a leaky gut syndrome. So that's your gut, and outside of it are just a bunch of sewer stuff that try to get into your bloodstream. So your gut is very smart. It has line of defenses. First, you have the physical defense called the mucin layer, which lines up the gut cells, and it keeps the stuff away and it traps the bad stuff. And then you have the biochemical, which is the tight junctions that approximates the cells, keep everything tight as well. And at last, you have the immune cells waiting for anything to venture in and completely eradicate it immediately. All three are under attack. So when they all become compromised, that's when trouble sets in, called leaky gut syndrome. Now, next slide, let's look at your barriers like a net and the ball like pathogens. Pathogen stands for bacteria, virus, toxins, and other poisonous stuff. So when the leaky gut syndrome becomes really bad, it cuts through the net, allowing the ball to get to your bloodstream. And that's just a lot of trouble because this pathogen can bring in all kinds of many different diseases, autoimmune disease and metabolic syndrome. Next. And these are the type of diseases it carries. And the next one. Okay, there you go. So the question is, what causes leaky gut syndrome? There's actually several, but I'm going to share with you the top two most harmful ones. The first one are the seed oils that coming from canola, corn seed, soybean, you name it. It's in every food we eat because that's how they're prepared and it's the cheapest. And it comes in omega-6, which contains linoleic acid. And this linoleic acid gets converted to what you call arachidonic acid, which is the main precursor of these major inflammatory compounds on the next slide. There you go. The thromboxane, leukotrienes, and eicosanoid, they create hell in your gut. Doesn't look too pretty, right? Yeah. So the next one is sugar in form of fructose. You don't really need fructose. Fructose are found in candy bars, frap, donuts, you name it. It's everywhere. So fructose disrupts your mucin layer, allowing the bad bacteria to chew on the mucin layer. And they have a byproduct called nitrates, which also destroy and render the tight junction permeable and the cells very loose. And at last, it acts as sugar bomb, weakening your immune system. So everything is compromised, it's game over. And these are the other causes of leaky gut syndrome on the next slide. There you go. So how do we fix this? Well, I'm going to introduce you to 3 biosoftwares. The first one would be, next. I'm just going to keep doing this para on the next one. Next would be Fiverr. So Fiverr has 2 types. There's the soluble and insoluble. Let's try to go for the insoluble fiber. The soluble fiber dissolves in water, and it creates this spongy jelly type in your system that binds to cholesterol like LDL and sugar. So it helps with your glucose spike because it prevents the sugar from coming into the blood. So it's good. And it also, next, enhances the absorption of your nutrients because everything moves slow, even your supplements. So even if you have these expensive supplements, if you don't have good absorption or a cofactor for it, it's just useless. Next, it also acts as a superfoods to your good bacteria, as prebiotic. If you don't have food for your good bacteria, they will also eat on your mucin layer. And then, the soluble fiber converts into these very powerful short-chain fatty acids. Next, as acetate, propionate, and butyrate. Now, butyrate, if you look that up, is the very, very powerful short-chain fatty acids. So many health benefits. Well, think of your butyrate as the friendly superhero in the neighborhood, always patrolling the colon. It literally punches the inflammations in the face, and then it acts as a major guardian for your tight junctions because it keeps it tight and sealed and it repairs it. Okay, there you have it. The next biosoftware is this is insoluble fiber. So insoluble fiber, now you know the difference. It adds bulk to your stool. It doesn't dissolve in water. So it creates a fecal hydration, means it prevents constipation because it keeps things moving as well. And it also adds bulk to your stomach on the next slide. So it gives you the satiety feeling, sending signal to your brain that, hey, stop, it's time to stop to eat. And then the next one would be, it acts as a scrub. So when it goes to your colon, it scrubs off the cancer cells. So together with soluble fiber, it creates a great synergy. Why? Because the insoluble fiber creates this lattice work in your intestine like a fishnet. And then the soluble fiber creates this globular gel that plugs to the wall. Together they create a second barrier that keeps the sugar coming in and pathogens. Amazing stuff, right? Okay. The next biosoftware would be the probiotics. Now, the next one, this is where you see the microbiome, which is an environment of many different bacteria, fungi, and yeast. There's the good guys and the bad guys. The name of the game is having more good guys. And when there's less good guys, that means there's going to be an imbalance, which is what you call, the next slide, dysbiosis. And this is all connected to these type of metabolic diseases. So where do you find your probiotics? Next, it's found in fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, and kimchi. Not a lot of people get to eat this, so I like to get my stuff from supplements. Next. And of course, the higher, the better, depending on your gut situation. And the more different strains, because each strain has its own different function and strength, the better also. The diversity, that's the key. Okay, then at last, the biosoftware aloe vera. So aloe vera contains this very powerful sugar called polysaccharides. And these are long chain of sugars that have many complex, powerful health benefits. This is not the type of sugar you think that's bad. So they have this mucilage, which is like a slimy gel that brings down inflammation and cools it off. And then before that. And then they have the acemanan. Before that, let's do the previous one. You have the acemanan, which is the polysaccharide that heals mucosal lining. And then the aloin, basically, that kills off bacteria, especially the yeast called Candida. Candida is known to do great damage in your gut lining. So what it does, it has many more benefits. So the next slide, that's what the aloe vera can do to you. Amazing, right? So think of your gut next as a nuclear reactor. And to power the nuclear reactor, you need the three biosoftwares. You have to have the probiotic to regulate the system, the prebiotics to provide the fuel, and then the aloe vera that cools, repair, and protect. So the top three would be, remember, probiotic, prebiotic, aloe vera. Okay. Now, moving on to the next pillar, that would be the immunity. Okay. Well, so what does your immune system looks like? Next. So your immune system is a network of tissues, organs, cells, and proteins that are always looking for the bad guys, like pathogens. And when they detect one, they deploy the immune cells to completely eradicate it. And this is a process of gathering information that later leads to antibodies for better future defense. So the name of the game is to keep your immune system working that way. Well, nowadays it's very difficult, right? Because of the modern lifestyle. The immune system is mostly weak for most people. The problem is when they become too chronic, it accelerates aging and also puts you at a high risk of early demise. So what we need to know is which villain or what villain is the main culprit behind the immune system being down. And that's what you call, ladies and gentlemen, the AGEs, right? So the AGEs are basically the baddest villain your health will ever encounter, because these are proteins or fats that went through a transformation that is very harmful after overexposure to sugar, called glycation. As a matter of fact, AGE is the main biomarker for every chronic disease out there. So the next slide, we'll look at the hemoglobin, which is a VIP protein. Why is it VIP? Because it's found in red blood cells that brings oxygen to your tissues, organs, and cells, and brings it back to the lungs as carbon dioxide to be exhaled. So now you know how important it is. And AGE loves to attack those proteins and glycate it, known as HbA1c. When it's too elevated, it destroys your blood vessels and puts you at high risk of diabetic, eye damage, kidney damage, and nerve damage. Another masterpiece of AGE is premature aging. This is what you consider destructive flare. They destroy everything in their way really fast, like they're on fast forward. And think of your tissues and skin, next slide, like a napkin, which is very smooth, and the AGE as the super glue. Once it attached to that, it's too late. You try to take it out, you make it even worse. Yikes. So sugar, right? So the question is, what is the main biosoftware or compound that is mighty and strong enough to challenge the AGE's terror? And that is colostrum. Colostrum is a first form of milk produced by the mother that just gave birth, either a human or cow called bovine. Super rich in nutrients and minerals, but is known for its proteins as super antibodies. So next slide. It contains 3 out of 5 major antibodies. And the reason why for the infant to have to be breastfed the first 24 hours, because it's very crucial for these antibodies to prime their immune system and digestive system. It's really good. And colostrum also contains, on the next slide, the anti-AGEs called the lactoferrin. Very powerful because it binds with the AGEs and destroys it. It also binds with the AGEs that's already attached to the tissue and reduce the damage. Very good stuff, right? Okay, so next slide. When we age, the vicissitude of life catches on. Our stress hormones goes up higher, pollution, food becomes more poisoning, pretty much everything, obesogens, the plastic, the environment, the cosmetics, everything. So we are always under attack, which can also accelerate aging and degeneration. On the next slide, the first sign of degeneration as you age is when you lose your muscle mass, called sarcopenia. Here's a fun fact. When you eat something, about 75% of your glucose load, your sugar, goes into your muscles for energy use and storing them as glycogen. So what happens when you don't have enough muscles? Well, you have all that excess sugar or glucose in your blood system. The beta cells have to produce more insulin to clear that into a fat depot. And worse, as you get older, your sex hormones go down and your growth hormones responsible for maintaining and growing muscles. That's why it's called growth. And this is why a lot of people don't look forward to getting old, because less muscles, less energy, and then more fat. and then insulin resistance. It's a really bad cycle for most. So how do we remedy this? Well, it's very simple. Exercise plus enough protein in your body. And protein alone will not do the trick. You have to combine it with strength training. Okay, speaking of protein, on the next set, you have the colostrum with super blends of proteins. The protein it contains is not just ordinary, they're just super. Well, I mentioned already the lactoferrin, the antibodies, then you have the peptides for inflammation in your gut, colostrum for the brain, and you have the IGF-1 growth factors. This one I like. The growth factors because it is the byproduct of growth hormones that is produced through the liver, has many metabolic benefits. So on the next slide, you will see how it is produced. And then on the next slide, it helps you gain muscles and lose fat. The reason why, because the IGF-1 is very similar to the molecule of insulin. So what does that mean? It means that it can enhance the uptake of the glucose load into your muscles and protein synthesis. So muscle gain. It also encourages your muscle stem cells to multiply and fuse more muscle fibers. And at last, it also is considered as a fat burner because it supports the utilization of fatty acids in your liver. By the way, your liver is known as the fat burning organ. So, okay, amazing, right? Well, we're moving on to the next pillar, which is the mobility. Next slide. All right, whew, let me drink water. You guys having fun so far? All right, good. Okay, so mobility, let me introduce to you the bone team on the next slide. We have the builder, the supervisor, and the destroyer. The osteoblast is the one that builds the bone and creates collagen and fortifies it with calcium. Then you have the supervisor, the osteocytes, which makes sure everything is intact and scans for any distress or damage. And then you have the one that does a dirty job, which is the destroyer, osteoclast, destroys the debris and gets rid of unnecessary parts of the bone. That's great because they work as a team. But the problem is when insulin resistance comes in, it deactivates the first two, which is your osteoblast and osteocyte, leaving, go back there please, leaving the osteoclast to do his job unsupervised. Okay, next. And this leads to bone disease like osteoporosis. So 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men over the age of 50 will experience osteoporotic fracture in their lifetime. And osteoporosis is when your bones are getting drained out of nutrients, the calcium, and it gets ready to be broken. And other diseases like this, osteoarthritis, is when your cartilage that make the bones meet at the joint are also getting worn out. And then there's rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease when your own cell attacks the joints. So this is what a bone disease looks like on the next slide. Looks very painful, right? Yeah, and this is what a brittle bone looks like on the next slide. You could see that it just looks so easily to break, and because it's almost completely drained out of its own calcium. And then there's the synovial joint. This is the most mobile type of joints you have in your body. Think of hands, fingers, shoulders, hips, knees, and feet. Basically, the main function of synovial joint is to prevent friction among articular bones. It also lubricates the joints like, gears in a machine. So what do you think causes the synovial joint? As you can see, it's being attacked by the baddest villain, the AGEs. Once the AGE attacks the fluid, it targets the polysaccharide called hyaluronic acid, which is the main ingredient of your synovial fluid, making it dry and useless and creating very painful friction. So this makes you release inflammatory cytokines, which open floodgates to pain, inflammation, and swelling. So again, the AGEs, right? So when the next slide, we know that calcium is meant for the bone, right? So Now, before the calcium, we need to have the biosulfur, which is the collagen. And here's a fun fact. 30% of your total body is made of protein, and your cartilage, bone, and joints are 80% collagen. So it just makes sense to supplement yourself with collagen, particularly type 1, 2, and 3. And the next one is hyaluronic acid, which is a special polysaccharide that has a binding effect on the water. So it creates this spongy liquid type that acts as your cushion, shock absorber, and pain reliever, and helps regenerate tissues around your joints and bones. Amazing stuff. Okay, now going back to the calcium, I mentioned a little earlier. So we all know that calcium is good for your bones. But here's the thing. Did you know that 90% of your calcium supplements are coming from limestone rocks? Yeah, you heard it, it's rocks in form of carbonate. Now, I'm not going to tell you why ingesting rocks is not good for you. I think that's self-explanatory. But, you know, the body cannot naturally fully absorb rocks. Come on, right? Yeah. But it's the cheapest. And we all assume that calcium, when you take it in, it goes straight to your bones. No, not at all. Actually, calcium likes to roam around your body. And they may end up in the wrong spots you don't want them to be in. Like, next slide, the eyes, the neurons, even the arteries, and many more, actually. So what do we do to keep this calcium from going crazy in our body, going loco? Well, we need a good biosulfur for that. And the biosulfur we need for that is vitamin K2 MK7. This is a form of vitamin K that is meant for metabolism of calcium. So what it does, it activates two very special type of proteins found in blood vessels, which is what you call matrix GLA protein, and the other one in the bone called osteocalcin. So basically, it unlocks it and activates it. So through carboxylation. So just to like spare you, sorry, go back there. Just to spare you the scientific stuff. This is how it works, right? So, I'm just going to do this, right? Next slide. So, so this is how it works. So once the matrix GLA protein and osteocalcin is activated, okay, they start to do some stuff with calcium. Very cool stuff. So matrix GLA protein, in short for MGP. Next slide. So the MGP acts as security agents that guards your vessels and your soft tissues and keeps the calcium from trespassing. And then it also acts as MGP cleanup crew agents. They bind to the calcium already set in the wrong spots to reduce calcification. And they also act as drop-off agents by bringing them to the spot where the calcium courier agents can spot them. So the osteocalcin basically binds into the calcium and brings them straight to the bone for absorption with the help of vitamin D. I mean, really cool stuff, right? Want to guess? Mitochondria, right? Next. Mitochondria is the powerhouse and gatekeeper of health. It's just the power plant of ATP, which is the main energy that sparks the neurons, fuels heartbeats, and power muscle contractions, and many more. Next slide. So ATP is basically the battery of life, which stands for triphosphate. That doesn't really matter, right? So how is ATP produced? Okay, next slide. ATP is produced through what you call respiration. So when food is taken in, it's broken down into glucose and converted into energy in your mitochondria. That's why when you take in food, it's called calories, also called energy. Exactly, that's what it is. When your mitochondria is robbed out of its own ATP, it becomes dysfunction. And you can find out if you have a dysfunction with your mitochondria through fasting insulin tests. Very similar to insulin resistance because they're very connected. So when there's too much mitochondrial dysfunction, next slide, this happens. Oh, no, previous. Too fast, man. Let's go. Okay, this happens. Insulinemia, which is an overgrowth of fatty tissues, blood vessels, and glandular tissue that could lead to heart disease and the big C, cancer. Yikes. So, well, it got preempted. But who do you think, not yet, who do you think or what is behind the mitochondrial dysfunction? Well, here we go. Let me introduce to you the same group, AGEs. The fructose kids, right? Well, the reason why, because the mitochondria has this enzyme called AMPK. I'll say to you, adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. It doesn't matter. So AMPK. AMPK, on the next slide, acts as a fuel gauge and a beacon for energy. So when it detects that fuel is running low on ATP, it sends signals for refueling. But see, the AGE comes to destroy the tower completely, leaving your mitochondria to starve to death. So, not yet. So which one do you think, or what compound do we need this time to combat these type of AGEs? We have the, next slide, biosoftware creatine. Next slide. Creatine is known as the ATP regenerator. And ATP regenerator and the creatine is actually found in meats and fish, and it's also manufactured in our body naturally through our liver, kidneys, and pancreas. When you take in creatine as a supplement, it is put in your system, in your muscles, as reserve energy in form of phosphocreatine. And it kicks in when the ATP is running low. So to make you further understand, I think you know this before, ATP, next slide, ATP-ADP cycle. I'm not going to make it too scientific, don't worry. So when you take it food, the food gets converted to ATP and stored in the muscles to power the whole body. And when the ATP is getting used up, it gets converted to ADP as drain battery. So the ADP has to recharge back to ATP, which takes time, called glycolysis. And this is where and when the creatine does its magic. It renders its charge to the ADP, immediately converting it back to ATP, so you don't lose your momentum. Now, to make you further understand, on the next slide, this is the analogy. The cell phone is the mitochondria, the battery is the ATP, and the power bank is the creatine. So, you know, when you have your power bank with you, you just immediately charge up your phone. So, in retrospect, your mitochondria is always getting supercharged. This is why this bio software is very much a favorite to a lot of athletes and fitness enthusiasts, because, next slide, in the gym, you can lift stronger, perform more repetition, run longer, run faster, even stay sharper. You know why? Because the brain contains the most mitochondria. Amazing. So how is this connected to mitochondrial dysfunction? Well, think of it this way. Next slide. The power plant is short of fuel. Well, you have a backup generator, which is the creatine. So even though when the main source is offline, you got the creatine keeping things online. Good stuff, right? Okay, next, speaking of the brain, let's go back to the brain. Neurotransmission actually requires the most energy, because I mentioned it has the most mitochondria. And guess what? The creatine can easily meet that. And also, on the next slide, creatine can act as a vasodilator because it increases nitric oxide activity, which can be good for your vascular system, like high blood pressure, but more studies need to be done on that. And of course, for the physical activities. And at last, when you combine creatine and protein and strength training, it amplifies your muscle gaining fast. It could slow down aging and help reverse sarcopenia. So, amazing, right? So there you have it, the 4 pillars of optimal health. And congratulations, you are now a biohacker. So whenever you reach out for that candy bar or get a bite of that pizza, or to some, a whole box of pizza, think of these guys on the next slide. How much damage they can do to your body. And remember that these guys on the next slide, how much they can help you to be the boss of your health. Now, this is a very powerful quote I mentioned before. On the next slide, if you do not have time for your wellness, you will be forced to make time for your illness. Thank you very much. Drop the mic. I wrote this digital book, which is a diet meal plan with recipes, which is for the 4 pillars of optimal health. And I know you guys are going to have some question how to take the bio softwares, and it's all in the Shred Fuel. And I wrote this book a long time ago, Eat More, Exercise Less. I'm working on my book too. And you can download it for free. So, so everything is there. On the next, I'll give you 30 seconds to scan it and download it for free. There you go. All right, 30 seconds. And then, Jed, is it okay? Just 30 seconds. I want to show them a really nice video, which is very important. So, okay, so when you're done, I'll just show one last thing, which is a very inspiring video that would even wake you up further. But I really hope that this presentation has given you a lot of insights that, you know, health is wealth, right? So I'll, after you guys are done with the QR code, I'll introduce a very short video you guys can watch, and it's really an amazing message. So hold on a second when everyone's done. So just to take note on the Shred Fuel diet, the first few pages, all the instructions on how to take your biosoftwares are there. I'm not associated with any supplement company, but I say I normally get mine from Healthy Options or online. But just be careful with how what brand you take. Kasi it's all about the bioavailability. For example, if you're taking vitamin C, 500 milligrams versus vitamin C 100 milligrams, you always think that the 500 is better. But it all comes down to bioavailability, how your body absorbs it. So it's all about the quality. It's the same thing as like there's a cheap wine, there's the expensive one, but it all come from the same grapes, right? So it all comes down to that. So it's always also being aware of the brand. So yeah, there you go. And last, I'm going to show you guys a small video. It's a great message. Go ahead.
What will your last 10 years look like?
Will you be quick enough?
Will you be quick enough for a game of tag with your grandchild?
Strong enough to
embrace every moment.
Will you grow old with vitality? Or get old with disease? It's time to decide.
There you go. So amazing, right? I just got that from TikTok, so a long time ago, I don't know when. But yeah, I knew I had to save it. I knew I was going to use it someday. So yeah, very powerful message. Now it's time to take charge. Like I said, life is amazing when you're feeling healthy, you're strong, and the quality of life is better even with your loved ones. If you can't do it for you, do it for your loved ones, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Can you please stay in front?
Okay,